Imagine sitting in front of your TV on a cold Sunday night in late 1987. You're catching up on the local news or you're tuning into Doctor Who on PBS. Suddenly, the screen flickers to harsh static. A figure appears in a rubber mask, swaying wildly against a spinning sheet of corrugated metal, while a buzzing tone cuts through your speakers. You aren't watching a horror movie, you're watching a real-time signal hijack that stumped the FBI and remains unsolved to this day. Welcome back to the Bizarre Ones. Today we're diving into the 1987 Max Headroom broadcast incidents, and of course with me will be Kai Lacrosse to break down how two television stations lost control of their own airwaves in a single night. So I'm your host, Tonya Kitsune, and with me today, as always, is Kai Lacrosse. Today he'll help me unpack one of the most famous unsolved broadcast hacks in history.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because of how it still has not been solved. It's not like they would be arrested today since the statute of limitations is up for the crime. So if they came forward, nothing would happen.
Exactly. And you think that they would come forward because it's one of the most infamous TV hacks that happened in history. But let's not get ahead of ourselves before we get to telling what we are before we get to tell you what we're talking about. See, Max Headroom was this really weird TV series where it claimed to be the first AI presenter, if you will, but it was this show where Max would introduce music videos, commented on various topics, and eventually interviewed guests before a live studio audience. They had this movie where it told his origin story.
Yeah, if I remember right, they had like this TV movie, right, to explain his origin story or something like that.
Yep. In this movie, the character's name was Edison Carter, and he was played by Matt Frewer or something like that. In the movie, he's this like journalist, right? And he's running from his enemies that are trying to kill him, and he crashes his motorcycle through this entrance barrier reading Max Headroom 2.3 meters, which is a UK vehicle clearance sign. They use the phrase maximum headroom, it's shortened, right? While he's unconscious and AI is created based off his mind, the AI develops a personality identified as Max Headroom and becomes a TV house who exists only on broadcast signals and computer systems, like Carter. Max openly challenges the corporations that run his world, but using commentary and sarcastic wit rather than journalism.
So basically, the character was from the television show.
Exactly, which now brings us to the actual hackings. So there were two hackings, if you remember right, from what we found out while we were researching from this episode.
Yeah, there was the WGN hacking, which I believe only lasted for 30 seconds. That was the first one. The second one was WTTW, which was like a PBS broadcasting thing. And if I remember right, that was like 90 seconds or something like that, right?
Yeah, that was the gist of it. It was two stations in the same town that was hijacked. It all happened in Chicago, Illinois in November 1987. Kai, you and I are both being in 1985, would have only been around, going on 2 years old. Like one going on two. So it's pretty long ago, as you know, because, we're both old fogies.
Hey, I'm only 41 going on 41 years old. I'm not aging yet, though I do have a bad knee, so you might have a point.
Yeah, so like you said, the first one was WGN. So the first hacking was during like a 9:14. Sorry, it was during a 9:14 p.m. Sports segment of WGN TV's The 9 O'Clock News. The screen for viewers went black for 15 seconds. Then after 15 seconds, the image of a person wearing a Max Headroom mask and sunglasses appeared. Viewers at the time and authorities who did the investigation say the hacker moved erratically on the screen in front of a semi-rotating corrugated metal panel that mimicked the real Max Headroom's geometric background effect, accompanied by a static garbled buzzing sound. Like you already said, Kai, the hack lasted for only about 30 seconds and was cut off when engineers at WGN changed the frequency of the signal, inking the broadcast station to the studio's transmitter atop the John Hancock Center. Now, when they came back on, WGN sports anchor Dan Rowan commented, "Well, if you're wondering what happened, so am I." Dan had joked claiming a computer that ran the broadcast glitched and started going crazy. I guess that was the official cover story at first or something. He went to broadcasting of the sports he was talking about before the
hack could happen.
Yeah.
This is where the technical chess match begins. The hacker didn't break into a building. They used a high-powered microwave dish, pointed straight at WGN's antenna on top of the John Hancock Center. In 1987, analog TV, if your signal is stronger than the station's, you win. You take over the screen, and it's simple as that. The hacker messed up the audio they were broadcasting, video, right? But they didn't hit the right audio subcarrier frequency, so viewers just heard this loud, horrible buzzing noise. In the WGN control room, engineers panicked and realized they had been overpowered and manually switched their studio to transmitter frequency. They zapped the feedback to Dan Rowan, sitting at his desk, completely clueless, saying what you had said, which was, "Well, if you're wondering what happened, so am I." Like that, or however news broadcasters talk. What no one expected at the time was the fact that the hacker was literally just running a dress rehearsal. They learned two things from that failure. First, they needed to fix their audio frequency. Second, they needed a target where engineers couldn't manually cut the feed. 2 hours later, they fixed the audio, pointed their dish at WTTW's transmitter on the Sears Tower, which was unmanned on Sunday nights, and dropped the full 90-second nightmare on thousands of Doctor Who viewers.
Which leads us to their second hack, which was WTTW. So it was said at 11:20 p.m. on the local PBS station WTTW during an episode of Doctor Who known as The Horror of Fang Rock, the broadcast was interrupted what appeared to be the same Max Headroom and same background effect. So it was obviously the same people behind it and everything. This one lasted longer. This hack was like 90 seconds. That's a total time of 1 minute and 30 seconds. So obviously much longer than the first hack. This time the sound was audible even though it was distorted, which it was probably distorted on purpose to disguise whoever was behind it. The hacker dressed like Max Headroom spent the next minute or so making a quick series of brief, seemingly unrelated comments and cultural references interspeed with excited noises and exclamations.
Yeah, and boy, the comments were not related at all and very strange. None of it was really coherent at all. Really, when you think of it, none of it was connected. And y'all can, actually see the video on YouTube, I believe, if you will. But yeah, the comments weren't related at all.
Not really. Though I guess to him it was. He seemed to first make some comment about nerds before calling WGN's Chuck Swirsky a freaking liberal for some reason. I was born in 1985, like you, Kai, but I have no idea what WGN's Chuck Swirsky's political affiliation is. At the point in the video, he holds up a can of Pepsi while referencing Catch the Wave slogan from the at the time recent ad campaign for Coca-Cola featuring the, real Max Headroom character.
At least he was staying in character, I guess, even though he got the wrong brand since it was Coke. All those things you mentioned don't seem to indicate any relevant connections to each other at all.
No, it doesn't. In all truth, it reminds me back in 2001 when I had this roommate who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she would say the most random, unconnected things and when she was not on her meds, and I'd be like, girl, what the fuck are you talking about? So I'm not sure if this is the same thing with what the hacker was doing, but I've seen the clips from the 90-second hack, and it feels like watching something like that. Like you said, it's on YouTube. People can check it out, and you can hear it all. And yeah, it's this makes no coherent sense,
No, I get what you're saying. It would be nice if the real hacker finally admitted he hacked it and was behind the whole thing. Then maybe he, she, or they could finally explain what the hell any of that meant. If anything at all. as a theater and art kid from back in the day when I was in high school, it's totally some weird artsy thing we type of kids are known for. So maybe the hacker was like going for that, like pushing the boundaries of art and all that.
It could be something like that. At one point during his broadcast, the Max Headroom hacker held up a middle finger near the camera inside what appeared to be a hollowed out dildo. So, yeah, I'm sorry for that. Anyone listening, this is probably not a family friendly episode of the podcast. But, anyways, that part right there sounds like what you were saying, Kai, pushing the envelope of what is considered art. This was 1987, so I'm sure viewers were shocked about the whole thing and about to storm the WTTW building and demand to speak to the manager like a typical Karen. But after some random moaning, the masked figure sang the phrase, "Your love is fading," hummed a part of the theme song to the 1959 animated series Clutch Cargo and said, "I still see the X."
Now, the references, I guess we should explain. So, the "I Still See the X" is a reference to the last episode of Clutch Cargo, which is sometimes misheard as "I stole CBS." Though maybe the hacker did mean they stole CBS, and admitting to an unknown hack of the CBS station somewhere, and like nobody knows, and they were actually saying "I stole CBS" and not "I stole C the X." So who knows?
You never know. The hacker definitely could have been, confessing to another hack, though no hack of such reference has been confirmed, so I doubt it. Like you would think of it, it was a total psychological, whiplash. Remember, back in 1987, there were no jump scares on YouTube because there was no YouTube or weird ARG internet videos. If your TV hijacked, you expected a national emergency alert or a technical glitch. Instead, you get this I don't know what word I was going for there. Distorted voice, laughing, screaming, and muttering what sound like absolute gibberish. He looks right at the camera and calls them all the world's greatest newspaper nerds, referencing, WGN, whom call letters literally stand for the world's greatest newspaper. But the creepiest part to me is that when he hums the theme song to Clutch Cargo, that weird late 50s cartoon that used real human animated lips onto drawings. It felt like watching someone's private mental breakdown beamed directly into your living room at midnight, And nobody knew it was a prank, if it was a prank, a threat, or something much worse. You're sitting in a dark room late on a Sunday night expecting Doctor Who, and suddenly this glitching, buzzing figure is laughing at inside jokes, humming old cartoons, and then getting spanked with a fly swatter by someone in a maid outfit before cutting to black. People were calling the police station before, right then, because they generally thought it was, cults or terrorists had taken over the airwaves.
Yeah, and unlike the WGN hack, the folks at WTTW couldn't stop it. Like, folks were freaking out, and it wasn't until the hackers relented it was finally done.
Yeah, it was the hackers that finally ended the hack transmission. They're the ones that did it, ended it, not the people at WTTW. Now, as Kai and I said, it was pretty high-tech for the time. It was done by sending a more powerful microwave transmission to the station's broadcast towers than the stations were sending themselves, triggering a capture effect. Experts have said that the stunt required extensive technical expertise and a significant amount of transmitting power, and that the pirate broadcast likely originated from somewhere in the line of sight of both stations' broadcast towers, which was, a top two downtown buildings in downtown Chicago.
Yep, and the thing is, the hack was difficult to accomplish in 1987. It became almost impossible to replicate after American television stations switched from analog to digital signals in 2009. Like, there were other TV hacks before, but this one was different.
Oh, they definitely were. So let's talk about those different hacks really quick as comparison to explain to our listeners of how these hacks were different. Now, to really understand how bizarre this was, you have to look at what broadcast hacking actually looked like back then. Just a year earlier, in 1986, you had the infamous Captain Midnight incident where a satellite engineer jammed HBO's feed. But Captain Midnight had a clear mission. He displayed a text message protesting HBO's high subscription fees for satellite dish owners. It was direct, it was a consumer protest, and the FCC tracked him down in months because he had recognizable equipment.
Of course, they caught the guy, like you said.
Yep. There was obviously the why behind it as well. But when November 22nd, 1987 rolls around in Chicago, all that logic goes completely out the window. Whoever hijacked WGN and WTTW wasn't protesting prices. They weren't making a political statement, I don't think. They weren't asking for money. They went to incredible lengths, setting up an expensive, microwave link and building a custom set just to put on a mask, slap themselves with a fucking fly swatter, and ran about Chuck Swirsky. It morphed overnight from technical civil disobedience into pure, surreal, chaos-driven art. I mean, it could actually be what you said, Kai, some, artsy kind of, person trying to do some art thing, pushing the boundaries.
And if you look back, 10 years before Chicago, the most famous broadcast hack in history happened in the UK in 1977, the Verilion incident. Viewers were watching the evening news when an eerie, metallic voice took over the audio, claiming to be an alien from the Ashtar Galactic Command warning humanity about nuclear weapons, which is scary for viewers back then. For us now, it would be whatever. It's that's how we are. We're kind of desensitized. So that kind of thing, we would be okay, whatever. Not only that, we know these kind of things. And so we'd be oh, this is a troll, because we're in the age of the internet. It was a pretty simple hack as well.
Oh, super simple compared to Chicago. In 1977, the hijacker just hijacked a single, local radio transmitter. The TV screen never changed. Anchor Andrew Gardner just kept reading the news, completely unaware why this alien voice spoke over him, right? Fast forward to 1987 with Max Headroom, and the game changed entirely. They didn't hijack the audio. They completely overrode the station's video, replaced the feed with a full home video setup, and broadcast a movie living nightmare. It went from audio prank to a full-on visual hijack. What makes the 1977 Verilion hack wild is how low-tech it was. All that hacker needed was a relatively small, home-built radio transmitter. They drove up to a hill near Hannington, England, targeted a local UHF repeater station, and basically overpowered the incoming audio signal with a stronger radio wave. It was localized, audio only, override quick and simple and cheap. Chicago was a different beast altogether. In 1987, you couldn't just overpower a transmitter from your car. The Max Headroom hacker had to intercept a studio transmitter link to STL. That meant positioning a high-powered microwave dish with a precise direct line of sight to the receiver antenna sitting on top of the Sears Tower in the John Hancock Center. We're talking about thousands of dollars in professional broadcast gear, precise geological alignment, and a deep understanding of how television engineering happened. In 77, it was a pirate radio prank. In 87, it was a military-grade broadcast heist.
So it wasn't something you could drive down to the Radio Shack or something. And yes, I realize I'm showing my age by mentioning Radio Shack, because our young listeners and viewers are Radio Shack, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, probably not something you could get at Radio Shack. So at one point, obviously with the Max Headroom incident, the FBI and the FCC got involved because, the FCC deals with radio, television, and communications. That's their thing. And the FBI, of course, they were going to get involved. No one was caught, and no one ever came forward as the culprit behind the whole Max Headroom hack. To this day, it remains unsolved.
And the reason they couldn't stop the hack, if I remember right, was because the broadcast tower was unmanned during those hours for the second hack. So, there was nobody there in that tower. It was completely empty. And I guess most likely the hacker would know this, that it was empty, if he was an inside person, which is why one of the theories that it was an insider. They would have known the tower was unmanned. Or it could have been just public knowledge at the time. But yeah, right?
Oh, yeah, it was so unmanned, so that's why, there was no ability to stop it before the hackers ended their transmission. A hack that would make Crash Override jealous. The character from the 1995 movie Hackers.
I love that movie. That's a really good movie.
Anyways, at one point, like I was saying, the FBI and the FCC got involved. If the Max Headroom hacker would have been caught, there would have been a $10,000 fine and prison time. In 1992, the 5-year statute of limitations expired, and the people responsible for the intrusion would no longer face criminal punishment should their identity be revealed. There was a few theories of who was behind the mask in the hack. There was, of course, the huge probability of local Chicago hacker groups, right? Though you would assume if it was any of them, they would have come forward because, they were hackers. They'd be like, oh, I did that shit. But they didn't. One theory was that it was a disgruntled ex-broadcast tech.
Which would make sense, like I said, because if it was ex-broadcast tech, they would know, if you will, all the technicalities of what time to do it and that one tower would have been empty,
Oh, yeah, they would have known. There was also the famous 2011 Reddit theory involving two local tech scene brothers. Currently, at the time of this broadcast, none of these theories have panned out. And honestly, I think probably the Reddit theory or one of the local Chicago hacker groups were behind the hacking.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, both of those theories seem the most plausible. What their intentions were, we'll really never know. But I would just seem to think that, that those are most likely, the possibilities of who was behind it. Is it Chicago hacker group or, the Reddit theory? Anyways, I've been the co-host, Kai Lacrosse, and I'll let Tonya finish it from here. We'll see you all in the next time in the next episode of this podcast.
Thanks, Kai. I don't think anyone is ever going to come forward and say they were the ones behind the hack. The hack was 39 years ago. I think if anyone was going to ever come forward, they would have done it by now, but they haven't. And I think that person, whoever is behind it, if they're not dead already, they're going to die with the secret. But let us know what theories y'all might have or what y'all thought of this episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, or share wherever you were hearing this podcast from. Next month's episode will be the disappearance of MV Joyita. After that one, there'll be 3 more episodes before season 2 of this podcast is over. The episodes will be as follows: the disappearance of MV Joyita, the simulation theory, the real Men in Black, and then the final episode of this season will be the missing 411 cases. Those will conclude season 2. Next year, we'll be starting season 3 of our podcast. So we really appreciate those who have listened to our podcast since we have started. Anyways, I've been your host, Tonya Kitsune. Until next time, stay bizarre.